And rehearsal with intel members tracking Maduro's movements down to what he ate, what he wore, his pets. And the U.S. says that preparation paid off.
The utmost of precision and integration within our joint force. We arrived at Maduro's compound at 1:01 a.m. Eastern Standard Time or 2:01 a.m. Caracas local time, and the apprehension force descended into Maduro's compound and moved with speed, precision, and discipline towards their objective and isolated the area to ensure the safety and security of the ground force while apprehending the indicted persons.
In the coming days, President Trump says they will be working to designate people to run the country. He did say yesterday that Venezuelan Vice President Delcy Rodriguez was sworn in, but he appeared to suggest she would go with whatever the U.S. was planning. The president also dismissed the idea of Nobel Peace Prize Maria Corina Machado taking power, saying she does not have respect in her country.
We're going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition. So we don't want to be involved with having somebody else get in and we have the same situation that we had for the last long period of years. We want peace, liberty, and justice for the great people of Venezuela.
The Maduros are facing 4 federal counts: narco-terrorism conspiracy, cocaine importation conspiracy, possession of machine guns and destructive devices, and conspiracy to possess machine guns and destructive devices. But this could have repercussions outside of Venezuela. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is putting Venezuela's allies like Cuba on notice. The Trump administration is expected to meet with House Republicans on Tuesday, where this operation could come up. House Dems, meantime, are expected to hold an emergency caucus meeting virtually today. President Trump is also returning to the White House today after spending 2 weeks in Mar-a-Lago for the holidays.
Peace and security. And there's a bit of irony there because President Trump, as he counts it, has solved 8 conflicts around the world. And yet they're going to say today that he is a threat to peace and security. Meanwhile, you know, the images we saw yesterday and last night with Maduro flying in a helicopter, passing the Statue of Liberty, to imagine that he could have taken a deal. He could have gotten a better fate than the one he has now, but he chose differently. And he found out that President Trump means business. And President Trump obviously talked yesterday, both on our air with us and at that press conference, about this is more than just going and capturing him. There's the shot right there. How iconic is that image of Maduro and his wife flying, looking at the Statue of Liberty, wondering why he made the worst decision?
And it's been interesting. Obviously, there's been a lot of reaction, typical reaction that you would expect from a lot of corners. A lot of Democrats in particular are, upset about, this whole thing, the whole operation, and they are saying that President Trump acted outside of his authority. The administration making the point that Maduro was a fugitive of justice. He had been indicted. He has, and he will face those charges of his indictment. But I was also kind of struck yesterday by the number of Democrats who put out statements actually in support. Yeah. Where maybe they said, they did the obligatory, I look forward to the president briefing Congress. But Jared Polis, governor of Colorado, Josh Gottheimer, congressman from New Jersey, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, congresswoman from Florida, all of them gave ringing endorsements of the removal of Maduro and making him come back to face charges. Maybe with an offhand comment like, we look forward to being briefed.
Yeah, Debbie Wasserman Schultz from Florida saying this is welcome news. Among other words, Darren Soto, the Democrat from Florida, capturing the murderous dictator Maduro is a major step. Also, Jared Moskowitz of Florida, the Democrat, posting no one should miss Maduro because he brutally oppressed Venezuelans and committed human rights violations. The New York Post editorial board with this headline this morning, captured, with a picture of Maduro on the cover, and the editorial board saying, quote, how to follow up on Trump's smashing Venezuelan success, make the transition to democracy fast. Obviously, U.S. markets, the equity markets, the oil markets, we already know oil prices are pretty low right now. Normally, an event like this, you would expect to see a spike in prices. A lot of analysts, we have Phil Flynn coming up in the show later in the hour. They're trying to predict where things are going to go because it's going to be a time will tell situation on whether or not we'll actually see more oil produced and exported out of this oil-rich country. But you got to think those are the plans in the making with this administration right now.
It's such a great point, Sandra. And so our viewers understand, Venezuela has the world's largest oil reserves, more than 300 billion barrels. They account for about 17 to 18% of the global reserves, particularly in that Orinoco belt. It's heavy crude, and that's why President Trump says he's going to go in. But I think to the New York Post editorial, they've got to move fast because we are going to corrode our adversaries, Iran, Russia, China's influence down there, and this is the path. It's unclear, though, who is going to lead it. The vice president down there, Delcy Rodriguez, first, it appeared at the press conference she was on board. She started to condemn the attack and say that Maduro was still the right president. But then we look at Maria Corina Machado, the opposition leader that has risked her life and well-being to rally the opposition in that country, was given the Nobel Peace Prize. She dedicated it to Trump, but President Trump seemingly not on board. But I thought her statement yesterday was so powerful. She said, Venezuelans, the hour of freedom has arrived. Nicolas Maduro faces international justice for crimes against Venezuelans and others. The U.S. has enforced the law after his refusal to negotiate an exit. Popular and national sovereignty now govern. But there are a lot of questions, Charlie, about what's next.
Yeah, and it's really remarkable to step back, particularly yesterday during that press conference where you had the chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Kane.
It required the utmost of precision and integration within our joint force. It involved more than 150 aircraft launching across the Western Hemisphere in close coordination, all coming together in time and place to layer effects for a single purpose, to get an interdiction force into downtown Caracas while maintaining the element of tactical surprise. We arrived at Maduro's compound at 1:01 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, or 2:01 a.m. Caracas local time, and the apprehension force descended into Maduro's compound and moved with speed, precision, and discipline towards their objective, and isolated the area to ensure the safety and security of the ground force while apprehending the indicted persons. One of our aircraft was hit but remained flyable, and as the president said earlier today, all of our aircraft came home, and that aircraft remained flyable during the rest of the mission.
I mean, you think about everything that led up to this moment, that we're learning now about the CIA and the daily meetings and the information that they were gathering and the exact whereabouts of Maduro that they were able to learn over time. And it came to Friday, 10:46 p.m., when you knew that President Trump signed off on this incredibly researched and delicate mission. It was Saturday at 2 a.m. when we started to hear reports of the explosions in Caracas. Shortly after, U.S. officials were able to confirm that the military strikes were underway. And it was a little bit later, 4:21 a.m., President Trump announces that indeed Maduro and his wife had been captured, and Colombia deployed their forces to the border. And at 5 a.m., Venezuela said it had no proof of Maduro's whereabouts. And it was 2 hours later, the DOJ indicted Maduro and his wife on those narco terror charges. And President Trump said Maduro and his wife are on that ship to New York. This obviously is when we went into rolling breaking news coverage of all of this. And then the UN warned of international sanctions, and that is when we saw all the reaction unfold. And then President Trump took to the microphone to talk about the transition and what will happen with power in Venezuela.
And I think it's also kind of interesting when you talk about, Congress wanted, especially Democrats were upset that Congress was not warned of this beforehand. This operation involves some 20,000 servicemen and women in our armed forces, and not a peep of it leaked out anywhere. And it does kind of raise a question. Can you imagine if President Trump had alerted Congress at 10:46 p.m. or 3 days ago? I think that it might have leaked out.
I think when you look at this operation, which is executed flawlessly, and then we got the details at that press conference about the teams involved, you really see everybody played a role. The CIA providing the intelligence, surveillance, and targeting and tracking. They really had zeroed in on Maduro's movements, what he was wearing, his habits. You had, of course, the Delta Force that went in. And by the way, they were accompanied by a law enforcement component to precisely rehearse. They set up a compound of Maduro's residence and did the drill over and over again to get it perfect. The Night Stalkers flew very low altitudes to the location. These are the same guys that supported the bin Laden raid. And when, Raising Cane was talking about creating this layering effect, they went in and struck targets to take out the air defense capabilities of Venezuela, as well as hitting the power grid to make it dark, because our military likes to operate in the dark. At the end of the day, it wasn't just flawless. It was a reminder to the world that our U.S. military is matched by none, and that there is nothing we can't do if we set our target.
Yeah, and of course, the White House yesterday released photographs of General Kane, Marco Rubio, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, President Trump, watching all of this unfold in a skiff at Mar-a-Lago. And President Trump called into Fox and Friends yesterday to describe in great detail as he watched the operation unfold in real time.
Impeachment, 25th Amendment, Delia Ramirez, Trump must be impeached, Jared Huffman. We are in 25th Amendment territory now. Senator Bernie Sanders, shocker, says this is the horrific logic of force that Putin used to justify his brutal attack on Ukraine. And New York's Dan Goldman saying this violation of the U.S. Constitution is an impeachable offense, which would be a pretty hard-hitting criticism if it were true.